Guys, thank you for joining me tonight. I am going to be going live on Instagram too, so just bear with me just a second. All right, let's go live everywhere. Welcome. I know this is sort of a spontaneous live, unannounced, but I wanted to take a little bit of time this evening to talk to the husbands and the fathers out there. This is Father's Day week, and there are so many men that are going to be celebrated, and then also there are so many men that are going to be overlooked. And so tonight I wanted to just talk about the power, the true power that God gives to husbands and fathers. So if you want to stay on, don't be distracted by what's on social media right now. Just hone in for just a few minutes while I talk about what are the biological differences between men and women. How does our biology speak to our role as husbands and fathers? And especially in a time when this month is being celebrated by other groups of people, the pride community, and I don't know. It seems like every time there's an opportunity to identify or distinguish men and women in their unique roles, society as a whole seems to try to unearth and turn over those honorable times and replace it with something abhorrent, something that shouldn't be celebrated. Um, but this week is special for men, and men should not be overlooked. One of the sad things that I heard, I'm not sure how true it is today, but several years ago, there were statistics that showed that even more than Easter and Christmas at a lot of churches, Mother's Day was the most attended service of all year. And it was because children came to be with and honor their mom. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, Father's Day is one of the least attended services in all of the year at most churches. And it's because there's a lot of fatherlessness. We could talk about the social issues that led to that, um, our governmental policies that incentivize broken homes and all of that. But the fact of the matter is we have lost honor for men and for fathers. And in the process of losing that honor, we have also lost sight of what significant role a father should play in the life of his children. And the same thing, the significant role that a husband plays in his marriage that is unique to his biology, that is unique to his spiritual makeup as a man. And so tonight I'm going to be talking about that. It's going to be very interesting. Hit that share button if you will. I'm sitting outside. It's such a beautiful night. So I wanted to take advantage of the breeze and the weather. But spread the word for me. One more thing, you're either watching this on my page or you're watching this on um, our marriage Instagram or wherever. I want to let you know about the Forevermore Marriage Getaway. That is an event that my wife and I host every year, and it's going to be at Hotel Hartness in Greenville, South Carolina. It's a beautiful boutique hotel on 150 acres. And ladies, if you are still scrambling to figure out what to get your husband for Father's Day, if you have little kids and you always get him something, or you just want to honor him in a special way, why don't you surprise him by registering for this event and booking a stay at Hotel Hartness at our incredible rate of only $189 per night? That would be an amazing gift to both of you to invest in your marriage, to say, I want to spend time with you. There was one couple who came last year. He had no idea what he was coming to. She planned the whole thing for his birthday, I believe it was. And she surprised him, and he showed up, and he was just overwhelmed. He was so excited that his wife went to all of this. And guess what? We've done all the planning for you, ladies. So if you want to honor your husband and the father of your children this weekend in a special way, go to forevermoregetaway.com, forevermoregetaway.com, and register you and him for a fantastic Labor Day weekend, August 30th to 31st. There's going to be worship and impartation, but there's going to be luxury and relaxation at this 5-star hotel. You're going to be able to catch your breaths, recharge your batteries, reset, get on the same page. And it's going to be an incredible weekend that you don't want to miss. So go to forevermoregetaway.com right now. And if you DM me, I will give you 10% off. If this is a Father's Day gift, I will give you 10% off of the registration. Just DM me wherever you're watching this and say, hey, I want that Father's Day discount. And I will give it to you 10% off of registration for you and your spouse to come to the Forevermore Marriage Getaway. Make this a weekend that he'll never forget. Okay? So with all of that out of the way, I titled this The True Power of Fathers and Husbands. What is the true power that we possess? You know, we did a series at the beginning of this year called The Story of Marriage, and you should be listening to our podcast if you're not. It's called Needed Conversations, but we talked about God's story of marriage from the beginning, and we went to Genesis, where the first marriage began, and we examined what the name of the husband means, what the name of the wife means, and what their particular roles were in the garden, and how sin caused them to fall off track with what their purpose was. And in fact, sin is what drives a wedge between not just us and God, but between one another. And it was the enemy's design to destroy the marriage, because marriage is the catalyst for heaven to invade earth. It is the portal for heaven, the culture of heaven to get into the earth. And so then the enemy came through a serpent to deceive the woman, who then shared with her husband. We could talk about all of the complexities of that. Who was with her? He was with her, and he partook of it himself. And you know, when she ate it, her eyes were not opened. But when he ate it with her, their eyes were opened. And that's where I want to begin tonight, to speak to the fact that men are gatekeepers for our family. What we say stands. The book of Numbers and other passages talks about the power that a father has in nullifying vows and commitments that their children makes. We have authority as the head of our households to block the plan of the enemy from entering in, even if our wife or our children have succumbed to the temptations of the enemy. We can put a stop to it, because that is the authority that God has given us as leaders of our home. Now, people don't necessarily like that term, head of the household, and we've had a lot of debate about this umbrella theory, with the husband being over the wife and the wife over the children, etc. But the fact remains, this is what the Bible says in the book of Ephesians, that our role is. We can talk about why we use those illustrations and how they're wrong and how it seemingly diminishes women. But the truth of the matter is that the spiritual authority of the home is the husband's. And he is to lead his family as a gatekeeper, a watchman on the wall, as one who sets precedence in the home for the morals and the values that their children will ultimately live by. It is his responsibility, but it's not his responsibility alone. His wife is to come alongside of him to help and support him in fulfilling this vision that God gives to them both. Just because you're head of the household doesn't mean you're more gifted, you're more talented, you're more discerning. None of those things are true. You might even be less powerful, less skilled. My wife, and I'm not ashamed to say this, many of you follow her on Instagram, she is more handy with a tool than I will ever be. It's just a God-given gift. She was raised in a household of guys who, taught her, and She has a lot of skills that I didn't get growing up. And that doesn't intimidate me because that doesn't lessen the position that I hold in the home as the authority, as the leader. And those gender roles and those gender dynamics oftentimes creep into our theology and aren't necessarily true. There are certain things that are cultural and biblical, but a lot of the roles that we call traditional or even conservative have no place in the Bible. In one of my books, I Love You More, Most, and Forever, I detail out the different roles that that men and women have based on three categories. The first category being historical. We have historical roles, some of which were brought about as tradition based on needs for survival. Men are inherently stronger than women physically, and in those times, they were more educated, and we lived in a far more barbaric society. It was fight or flight all the time. Like, we live in such a comfortable setting. Like, some people, they have their entire career on their phones and they never have to leave their house. And many of us men could say we never built our home physically. But hundreds of years ago, even as early as the early 1900s and 1800s, men were building houses from the ground up. They were hunting for food. Farming and agriculture was a very common profession. And so these roles that we fell into um, were just based on needs to survive. But then, of course, once technology comes in and we no longer have to fight for survival in the same way that we do, maybe on a physical level, a lot of the fights that we face nowadays are psychological, especially with the onslaught of social media, and it's getting even worse with artificial intelligence. And so we are now confronted with um, these biological roles that were historical and cultural, but are no longer relevant. In a lot of homes, there are women who are making more money than men, and that's okay. Women can lead, and Jesus empowered women to lead in a lot of ways. And then, with our modern conveniences and access to information and education and all of the rights that have been given to women, a lot of them are making more money, and they should make the money that they deserve. And we as men should not be intimidated, because when we go out into the world, we don't represent ourselves as individuals. We represent a collective. We represent the one flesh union of a man and a woman in marriage. And then we represent the brand of our family, and ultimately the brand of the kingdom of heaven, the culture that we are trying to mirror by what we read in the Bible through a life of the Holy Spirit. And in the home, it is the husband who takes charge and leads in that way, in setting the tone of the culture of his home. A culture is formed when two or more people agree on a certain lifestyle. And so he takes the lead in agreement with his wife, and they move together. And so we have to be okay with looking at some of these historical roles and saying they are no longer relevant for the times that we're living in. They may become relevant in the age to come. Who knows what happens when war occurs? Most people they talk about inequality between genders, but we often fail to remember that in the United States of America, at least, it's only the men when they turn 18 that have to sign up by law into the draft for the military or the army in the event that there's world war or whatever. There is this expectation that men, because of their physical stature, will go and fight and put their lives on the line to protect um, the nation that they were born in and the family that they're seeking to preserve. I mean, you can go as far as Titanic and seeing that it was mostly women and children that survived because that was the culture of the day. Yes, men had certain rights in certain areas, but then they also had a lot more responsibility. These dynamics are shifting in some ways, and that is okay, right? because there are other means to protect ourselves because of technology. Homes are built in really extraordinary ways, and we are able to make our lives function in an easier way. It may feel hard to you right now, but if I were to transport you back in time 100 or so years, you'd think differently about the level of work that you're putting in every single day. And so those historical roles have to be adjusted, and we have to accept that. Now, there are certain roles that may be historical and cultural that also align with our biology, which is the second category. Our biology speaks to our role as men and women, whether we want to believe it, whether or not we want to accept it, right? And this idea of gender in and of itself has become convoluted, right? And we think of it as um, physical characteristics and how we present ourselves to the world, but it actually goes far deeper than that. Our sex and the chromosomes that we carry and the development of our body and the hormones that are released all contribute to our God-given role as a man or as a woman. And the more we continue to be ignorant about that fact, the weaker we are going to be as a society. The strongest of societies throughout history are those who understand the importance of both the male and female expression, not just in the home, but in society as a whole. God created man and woman to have dominion together. I've taught this before, but if you go to the book of Genesis, he spoke to them and he created them in his image and likeness. And he said to them, be fruitful, multiply, subdue, have dominion, replenish the earth. That sevenfold mandate that we are still to live by. That is the core of all of our purpose. This earth is a gift, and we are to take dominion in order to bring the culture of heaven to the earth. But that dominion mandate is impossible to fulfill in ourselves as men and women. Men without women will never be able to fulfill the dominion mandate. And the same is true on the opposite end. Women, apart from men, will never be able to fulfill the dominion mandate. I love what Lisa Bevere has been saying lately, because I heard a lot of people use the phrase, the future is female, right? And it's continuing to promote female empowerment, but there's some deception there because the future is not female apart from the male. The future is male and female. The moment we stop recognizing maleness and femaleness according to God's original design is when the future comes to a halt. We will never progress unless there's the recognition of a unique calling upon men and women in collaboration to fulfill a mandate given by God to have dominion. We can't have dominion without cooperation between the sexes. So, as much as we want to say, I don't need a man, right? Ladies, I've heard it over and over again. You do need a man. As much as you might be able to pay your bills on your own, as much as you might be able to protect yourself by buying a weapon or installing a security system in your home, let's take all of those traditional and cultural needs for one another away, and let's peel it back to the biology and the biblical roles that God has set forth. You need men in your life. You need a husband's voice. You need a father's voice in the life of your children. I mean, just practically speaking, without the male and female sexual relationship, the next generation cannot be produced. They've tried very hard to create artificial wombs to incubate babies, but and they're able to, with premature babies, put them in artificial environments to help them develop, but it only goes so far. Right after a certain number of weeks, and they've never been able to have a child be developed in an artificial womb from inception or conception. And so all of these things that we try with science it's always going to fail because God is sovereign over who enters and exits the world. And as much as we tinker and experiment, you will always need the DNA of a man mixed with the DNA of a woman to create offspring, right? A unique genetic code that had never existed before then. And this is why it's important to recognize biology and to look at science and what we've discovered about what is hidden in our cells, to understand the story of marriage and the story of God that's written in our DNA. I want to read a little bit from, and I hope some of you are still on, because I'll just sit here all night and talk about these things because it just stirs me to understand the uniqueness of men and women, especially in times and in months like this when we have lost sight of these roles, right? The biological perspective seems to be pretty clear, but with scientists actively seeking to create artificial options for having a child, this could make biology for most people hard to understand. And of course, I'm not an expert in biology, but I have taken biology and I know the basics of how the human DNA works. Right? I do know that 23 chromosomes are required from a mother through an egg, and 23 chromosomes are required from a father through sperm in order to reproduce. In addition, that embryo requires a womb for gestation to occur. Females have XX chromosomes and males have XY chromosomes, meaning that a female will contribute an X chromosome every time, while males will contribute one or the other. I don't know if you caught that, right? So if we look at the female genetic code, right? She has XX chromosomes and males have XY chromosomes. They say that all of us start out as females, and at some point in the early stages of gestation and development, those who will become boys will go through this testosterone bath, and then they will develop all of the male characteristics. But it's at conception that process is initiated, whether or not the signal is sent out as XX or XY. And here's the thing, and the importance of men, right? The signal is generated from the sperm of a man. It is not generated from the egg of a woman, because all that a woman has to contribute is an X. She's going to give an X every time, and you need two parts to the genetic code. You need the mother's side and the father's side. The mom is going to give an X every time. If the father gives an X, those two X's determine that they're going to have a baby girl. And if the father gives a Y, that X and Y is going to determine that they have a baby boy. The father's seed determines the identity of the child. From the beginning, it determines the gender of the child. Now, the science is out on whether or not we'll ever get to a point where artificial wombs are viable options for taking cells from conception to a fully developed baby. I don't think it'll ever happen. And they're also trying and tinkering with mixing the cells of two women with or the cells of two men to try to create some viable offspring, which I don't think will happen either. Um, Artificial wombs that have been created for babies who were born premature have been rather successful, but beyond that, we need the womb of a woman, and we need the egg that she produces, or that she is really given uh, from the time she is conceived, right? Because a woman was born with every egg that she will ever have, but a man will always continually generate new sperm, even until his older age. That's why people are confused when they see people like Robert De Niro or some of these older celebrity men who are still having babies, right? Because that man's seed continues to produce, and he is determining the identity of the child by either giving an X or a Y chromosome to pair with the X chromosome that the woman will give in order to identify the gender of the child, or the sex of the child, rather, I would say, because sort of this word gender has been made up and now has been conflated to a certain degree. But for all intents and purposes, I'm going to use the word because this struggle in our identity is written within our genetic code, right? God either gives you the XX or the XY. There are certain anomalies that occur throughout creation certain deformities. This is a product of sin. But as the norm, men are born with XY chromosomes and women with XX chromosomes. And so, looking at this phenomenal discovery, we understand the importance of a father in the child's life. And furthermore, the importance of a husband in the home, caring for his wife, fulfilling those biblical roles, and being the one who imprints upon the next generation. This is who you are. It's not that women will not contribute to the shaping of the child. Of course they will. They're nurturers, and women leave undeliable impacts on all of us, leave these imprints, that's for sure. But the whole of the identity, by and large, is shaped by the voice of the father. I want to talk about this a little bit more. Um, Our biology provides key indicators as to what roles we are to play in society. Now, again, I'm not talking about traditional roles. I've discussed that. If you missed it, you're just jumping on. You have to come back and listen to what I said. We have to do away with some of these traditional and cultural roles that don't align with a biblical model or are speak to us in our biology, right? So the fact that people believe that women are only good for washing the dishes and cooking, etc., all of that is obsolete. There's no biblical precedence for that, right? Or that women can't have jobs, or that women couldn't make more money than their husbands. All of those are misnomers. But we have to recognize that there is still differences between men and women, and those differences show up in our biology. It's important for us to understand, because whether we like it or not, our biology indicates those differences. Now, as I continue to go into these biological differences, I understand there's certain exceptions, but that does not change the wide-ranging scientific evidence that has been presented to us. For example, all men are not stronger than all women. There are certain women who are stronger and faster than certain men. However, comparing men to women as a whole, men are biologically designed to be stronger and are capable to sustain muscle mass at a greater rate than women. That's why there's such a debate right now about allowing those who identify as transgender, which is not a thing, uh, who were born biological males, but claimed to be women. They want to compete in men's sport, and there's such a raging debate about it. And even people who affirm others' choices to identify as another gender have a problem with it, because it's common sense. It's biological. Our muscle mass, our stature, our wingspan, the size of our hands, the size of our feet, it gives us a competitive advantage. Men have a proven physical advantage. Now, while I do understand that biologically not every woman or every man is the same, right? The standards that are displayed across each gender do speak to certain roles that men and women would play in marriage as well, right? It's understandable that men would play this role of provider and bringing security or protection in a physical sense, and his stature is of a certain size for a certain reason. And again, not to confuse the fact that there are short and small men and there are larger women, right? I think that if I were ever to try and play, even if you take the best high school male player of tennis and put him against Venus or Serena in the height of their career, they would have had the floor wiped with them. But if you take Venus or Serena and pit them against the top male players, right? There's no comparison. It's just incredible, the difference. And that's not to say that one is more important than the other or whatever. We're talking about sports here. But what I'm saying is the biological differences have to be recognized and accepted. Here's why. God's design for marriage stretches far beyond the relationship between a husband and a wife. Marriage should also produce a father and a mother who pass on their morals and values to their children, and therefore pass on God's glory and image to another generation. Now I understand. Uh, uh, Now I understand that some married couples struggle with fertility. That does not diminish their collective power as a man and a woman to father and mother, especially in these times when there are more children who need fathers and more children who need mothers than there's ever been in history. But with that in mind, I also don't want you to think that miracles can't happen. So if you're believing for a child, God can still make a way, right? But no matter how his will plays out in your life, God still has a plan for you to express in your maleness and femaleness these motherly and fatherly characteristics. Maybe you don't have children, men. There are plenty, especially this weekend. You can look around and see it in evidence everywhere. You know, you can go to church, you see the fathers are not present, right? You can identify those who you can take under your wing and use these fatherly instincts to speak over their life and pull out their God-given identity. But we're talking about biology here. Biology helps us to understand that women have been designed as nurturers. Their ability to incubate and multiply, whatever is given to them, is written in their DNA. And their ability to sustain life, it just points to an ability that men that just doesn't have, right? But we're talking about men. So let's talk about the biology, the role that biology plays in our identity as men. Men have roles that are indicated by our biology also. For instance, the fact that the father's chromosomes determine the gender of the child points to the father's significant role in determining the trajectory of a child's life. From the words that are spoken over the child and blessings that are passed from generation to generation, the Bible shows time and again how significant of a role the father plays. The physical advantage as well that is in our biology that we have as men over women also speaks to our role as protector of the family. And I know that's not politically correct to say, but I'm okay with that, especially since most women feel like, hey, I can protect myself. And there's technology that helps. But the truth is that men have been given, on average, more brute strength than women. In addition, a woman's body has to pull double duty when carrying a child. For instance, the Bible says, Paul, speaks to the church and the men, saying that women are the weaker vessels. Well, weaker doesn't mean less than, but by and large, women take more of a toll on their body naturally through childbearing and then having that child cling to them and nurturing and nursing and recovering and going through those cycles than a man will. So there are more instances in her life, if she's a mother, especially, when she will be less able to protect herself or defend herself in a way that a man could, because he's not bearing that load on his body. His body is designed to protect the vulnerable seasons that a woman goes through when bearing a child. And it's a remarkable thing that a woman does, but the man is designed as a protector. Men, the truth is that we have been given more brute strength. And let's keep going here. The biological differences move beyond the physical attributes as well. Of course, while there is a trend in society aiming to squash the notion that there are no differences in male and female brains, science simply does not agree. While we have discovered that the human brain has far more plasticity than we once understood, that does not eliminate the overwhelming evidence that there are differences between the male and female brains. Of course, some of the greatest teachings that I've read on this, from a Christian perspective at least, has been from the neuroscientist Dr. Caroline Leaf. She has a book on it. I would recommend it. While most people discuss what one gender has versus what the other doesn't, what is unique about her examination of the male and female brain is that she teaches about the difference between the male and female brain as being more about how each gender processes information, not in terms of our capacity or our overall intellect. That's not the discovery that she made, at least, and other scientists as well. In other words, let me explain it this way. If not careful, when we're describing the differences between gender, we can start creating a competition between the two. And then there's this underlying assumption that one gender will come out on top in value or relevance over the other. And that's simply not the case. The differences between the male and the female brain have everything to do with how we as men approach information versus how women approach and process information. And there's some amazing science that points to God's brilliant design of these two genders and why we need both of those perspectives. One of those examples that I like is in physical sight and hearing. The physical sight and hearing of men in comparison to women is phenomenal research as to the roles that will ultimately play. This is because the chromosomes that differentiate men and women affect how we process what is coming through our optical nerves and how we hear, what frequencies we're able to pick up on, right? And again, it's not that we both don't have 20/20 vision. We both have the capacity to have 20/20 vision. It's not what we see that differentiates us as men and women. It's how we see. How we see what we see differs. Science has shown that men tend to have better visuospatial skills and can analyze objects in motion very well, while women are more likely to remember the details of what they see and analyze the nuances of color better than men. In fact, men tend to experience color blindness at a vastly higher rate than women. All of this is scientific evidence as to our particular role in society, in the home, how God has designed us, right? And instead of fighting it, it will inform us as to the roles that we should be playing. Again, we both could have 20/20 vision, but the fact is that women see a more nuanced variation in the color spectrum than men. If a man sees a blue shirt, he's going to say that's a blue shirt. The woman's going to say, no, that's cerulean, or that is baby blue, or that's navy blue. And men may have certain variations depending on their creativity, levels of creativity, etc. But by and large, women are going to see those nuances. Men are better at seeing objects at motion and getting that full picture, where women are able to remember more details. Okay, so what does this say about our role as men and women? Well, this hints at most men's inclination to see big picture, while women are more inclined to focus on the details. According to Dr. Leaf, this isn't because women never see the big picture and men never get into the details, but instead, men see the big picture first and then move into the details. And vice versa with women. Women tend to see into the details first and then zoom out to see the big picture. Are you getting me? Because some of you are probably like, well, I notice the nuances of colors and I'm a man. Well, that's true. You still can recognize a variation of colors. It's not that what you see is different. Again, it's how you approach it. You're zooming from the big picture outward, inward, and women zoom from the details outward into the big picture, right? Men and women have been designed by God to be complementary to one another. And when we stop fighting this, the better we will be in every aspect of society, because we need our unique perspectives. This is why I believe we need to address gender equality and even gender equity from a renewed context. I don't believe that equity is possible. When talking about equality of opportunity, absolutely. We should all have the same access to be able to educate our sons as we do as our daughters, and they should have the same voting rights and protections under the law and all of these wonderful things and opportunity to go and strive and but we are not all created the same, not just in our gender. I mean, we have varying height differences, different skills, different personalities, and all of that. Equity, by and large, is not possible, especially when you look at the vast differences between men and women. We have to address this from this context, or else we're going to be putting in place barriers that restrict us from advancing as a society, right? Because we're fighting ourselves. We're fighting our greatest strengths, which is the uniqueness that we bring to the table as a man, or as a woman. All of these distinctions need to be factored into the conversation so that we can build sustainable solutions that enable everyone to access and express their potential within society, right? So men are often visionaries. I said to you earlier, the rate of color blindness among men is exponentially greater than that of women. We see differently. I go to the Bible because let's step into this third category. We've talked about historical roles. Now we've talked about how our biology speaks to our nature, and I'm really just scratching the tip of the surface, right? I could go more, but I don't want this to go on forever here. I'm just trying to make a point tonight. But I'm moving into the third category, which is our biblical roles. This is what has come from the mouth of God onto the pages of the Bible that speak to what we are called to do, the roles that we are called to fill in society as men and women. And in the Bible, I don't think it's any coincidence that you don't see at any point, or at least recorded, the miracle of Jesus healing the blind woman on the road to such and such, or the blind woman who was here or suffering or whatever. And women receive miracles. You have the woman with the issue of blood. Women receive breakthrough. You have the Samaritan woman. You have so many women that are referenced in the Bible. But there was not one woman who was ever healed of blindness. Now I've seen and met blind women in the real world. They exist. So why would the Bible not mention? The Bible says that there are so many miracles that Jesus performed that they would fill the volume of every book that has ever been written. That's how many and how frequent these miracles were. So you're telling me there wasn't one blind woman that Jesus healed? Of course not. Now, I don't know that to be 100% fact, but I don't doubt it. There's a strong positive uh, inclination in me that Jesus probably healed blind women too, but there's a reason why it wasn't recorded, right? There's something that is being said, I believe, prophetically about men's capacity as visionaries. And again, that doesn't mean that women can't also be visionaries, but it's us being able to see the big picture in collaboration with the woman who works in the fine details that makes us a force to be reckoned with as husbands and wives in marriage, right? And it's the men that should be casting a vision for their home, leading in the spiritual development, leading in entrepreneurial endeavors, and providing space for the woman to not have to worry about the vision of the home, and she can pursue, in collaboration with her husband, a unique vision that is given to her as well. God will give her visions, and it's her husband's role to help cultivate that and to make space for it and identify those gifts and push her out there and give her to the support and the resources that she needs to succeed. This is what a man of God, a husband, is called to do, right? These are our biological roles. And of course, when it comes to vision, men are drawn away by our natural eyes. A lot of the sin that we engage in as sinners is the lust of the eye, right? Not that women, again, don't lust with their eye, but the scale of struggle that men have with, say, pornography or, sexual sin or lusting after women. the rate of that is far more than that of women. It seems like it catches men because of what's happening with our eye. We're called to be visionaries. The enemy's going to attack us at that level. And of course, that spiritual blindness. If he can blind the spiritual eyes and the discernment of the husband, it leaves the entire family vulnerable to the attacks of the enemy. And so this is how biology speaks to this role that we have as a husband and as a father. Now, biology gives us a great understanding of these intrinsic roles that we play, but the Bible is our ultimate guiding force to helping bring us back to the foundational design of masculinity and femininity. God desires to move us beyond surviving into a place where we are truly thriving and taking dominion as humans who are manifesting God's kingdom here on earth. Both men and women play unique roles in the unfolding of this plan. Of course, certain responsibilities and jobs may shift with the turning of the pages of history. I've discussed that. But the truth about men and women stays constant. Remember, maleness and femaleness are directly connected to our ability to function as a husband or a wife. That's both before and after you walk down the aisle. I put out a reel earlier this week and I said, just because you say I do, just because you have a wedding ceremony, just because you sign on the dotted line that marriage certificate and file it with the government, doesn't mean a magic wand has been waved over you and you're automatically a husband or a wife, right? That role has to be cultivated. And it should be cultivated before you do all of those other things, right? It should be being cultivated in you as you're being raised by your parents. And of course, a lot of us have deficiencies in this area, and the Holy Spirit comes to fill those gaps. And God, as Abba Father, comes in to ultimately shape our identity, right? The voice of the Father saying, "This is my son, whom I am well pleased. This is my child. This is their calling. This is their purpose," right? Um, while certain responsibilities may shift with the pages of history, it is God that ultimately determines what our function is as men and women, both before and after we walk down the aisle. You could be a wife waiting on the husband to show up, or a husband waiting for the wife to show up, or you could be married to someone on paper and neither one of you have shown up as a husband or a wife. I hope that makes sense. The husband's first assignment, let's talk about that. We're now in biblical roles. According to the book of Genesis, chapter 2, was that of a gardener. Before the wife was pulled out of the husband as a separate entity, Adam was in the garden, tending to it, giving names to the different animals, again, speaking to his role as an identifier. It was there that he discovered that there was not another created being that had enough capacity to relate to him. He saw the animals match up in pairs, and he says, "There is no one suitable for me." And of course, animals help in many ways, but without complementary relationships with other humans, we cannot thrive. And so God pulled out of Adam a helpmate, and this distinguished her as a wife. And at first reading, we understand that the husband's assignment was the work of tending and keeping the garden, and the wife's assignment was to the husband. It's been said before, but it's worth repeating here. Men often find purpose and fulfillment in what they do, while women find fulfillment and purpose in how they relate. Now, as mentioned before, that's not to say women don't find purpose and fulfillment in the work she does, and men don't find it in relationships. But I do believe that how men and women approach life, speaking of the male and the female brain, it differs. How we approach that work for women is often relational. And when they leave jobs, they grieve not just the work that they put in, but the relationships they formed. Whereas men won't grieve as hard over the ending of those relationships as much as he will the grief of, what do I do with myself, right? Because I found my purpose in the work that I've done. Or if a man is void of purpose, you could tell he's shrinking in his identity and his countenance and all of that, because men are inherently designed to the work of cultivation, and it starts in the garden, right? Not just your career, but the garden that is your wife, and helping to cultivate the greatness inside of her. This is evident also in the Hebrew words for husband and wife. The Hebrew word for husband is ish, and the Hebrew word for wife is isha. Husband and wife, they're very similar but differentiated by two letters. The word husband has the letter yod, and the woman has the letter hey. Putting these two Hebrew words together spells yod hey, which is the name of God, which again speaks to how vital it is for us to be walking in our unique roles, because together we make up the full image of God. Let's look just at the husband, because that's what we're talking about tonight. It's this word ish. A man as an individual, a male person. The translation of this Hebrew word is also champion or husband, good, great, mighty, steward. His role of a gardener did not stop when the wife was pulled out of him. Quite the opposite. He was enabled to complete the work that he was assigned. Looking at the Hebrew definition, we know that he was a husband, a champion, he was a steward, but in addition, the Hebrew word that distinguishes the word husband from the word wife is yod. In Hebrew, this word means hand. This points again to a man's God-given instinct to work the work of his hands. This isn't the last time we see the word gardener and steward as descriptors of the role of a husband. In fact, the very origin of the word husband comes from gardening terminology that we see displayed in the book of John, chapter 15, when he says, "I'm the vine, you are the branches, and my husband and my father is the husbandman," or gardener, has been translated in more modern translations. Even God is referred to as a husband in the context of gardening. This passage describes the role of a husband as cultivator. So, within the context of marriage, what is your role according to the Bible, husbands? It's to cultivate the potential that is inside of your wife and inside of your children. And in order to do this, men, you have to have, number one, good work ethic. Laziness has to be squashed. You can't be afraid of getting up early and going to bed late. Of course, there's a whole teaching I have on the power of rest, because before God told Adam to do, he showed him the art of resting on the seventh day, right? Before the dominion mandate to do was given, he showed them how to rest. So we have to have adequate rest, but we have to work, and we have to have good work ethic, and we have to work smart, and um we have to have ingenuity, right? We have to have, number two, not just a good work ethic, a vision for the future. Remember, we talked about our eyes, our vision, our ability to see big picture in a way that maybe our wife is not able to. We have to see a vision for the future, and here's the other thing: articulate that vision in a way that our wife and children can understand it. And it doesn't have to be groundbreaking. It doesn't have to be to save the world. Nobody's asking you to be Superman or any one of these Marvel characters. It has to be clear. It has to be succinct. It has to be communicated effectively. And you got to have a vision for your family's spiritual growth. You got to have a vision for your children's education. You have to have a vision for provision. You have to have a vision for your careers and callings, and for the gifts of your wife to be utilized at their greatest capacity in the most effective way. In order to bring glory to God, you have to have a vision. Number three, you have to be strong and resilient. And that resilience and that strength does not come from your physical ability. You might be able to bench press more than me, but you may not be as strong as me in the realm of the spirit. Yes, we have to be strong physically and take care of our bodies. Absolutely. But we have to be strong in the spirit. We've got to be prayed up. We've got to know the word of God. We've got to memorize scripture. We've got to show up in the morning and pray for our kids, and show up at night and tuck them in and pray for them again. We've got to lay hands on our wife and call forth the potential on the inside of her. We've got to show up with strength, and a strength that can only come from roots that are planted in the presence of the Lord, walking according to the Spirit. Lastly, We have to be accountable to others. So, number one, work ethic. All of these are biblical principles. Number two, a vision for the future. Number three, strong and resilient, a strength that comes from the presence of God. Number four, we have to be accountable to others, especially our wives, our helpmate, our one flesh partner. Your God given assignment as a husband, according to the Bible, is to lead. Lead your wife and children, according to 1 Corinthians 11:3. It tells us that the husband is the head of the household. In other words, you go first. That's what it means, plain and simple. Doesn't mean you're better than. It doesn't mean you have dominance over. It doesn't mean that you should be the one uh, um, uh, that everybody accommodates at all times, right? Honor, yes, but slavery in your home, your children are not your slaves. Your wife is not your slave, right? Your God given assignment is to lead, go first. And your God given assignment is to love unconditionally. We see this in Ephesians chapter 5, 25-30. I want you to go read it. You're to wash your wife with the water of the word. Give yourself like Christ gave himself for the church. That means you're to care for your wife as you would your own body. This is the power that husbands have. We are to cast a vision for our family and provide a secure environment for our wife to express vision in like manner. We're to cover our wives in prayer. This is the power of a husband. This is the power of a father. And this is why we need men of God to step up to this plate in this hour. We need the spirit of Elijah to come, for the hearts of the fathers to be turned towards the sons toward the fathers, and in continuation with mothers and daughters. We need fathers and mothers in the kingdom. Jesus said it this: there are many teachers, but there's not a lot of fathers. To father takes more responsibilities. It's not showing up and taking credit when the going is good. It's showing up at every season, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And you're there to support and undergird your children's destiny. You are important. I want to speak to the fathers and the husbands out there who feel undervalued, right? We're the last ones to get applause. Everybody shows up on Mother's Day at church, but nobody shows up on Father's Day. And it's a sad thing, right? There's all these things, special, sweet, and sentimental videos that we see pop up on social media around Mother's Day. And then the other day I saw, earlier today, I saw this little meme that was funny on the onset, but then it wasn't funny. It was kind of offhanded, like an insult, right? It was a Chick-fil-A advertisement that somebody had generated that said, on Father's Day, which is Sunday, fathers get to eat for free. But everybody knows that Chick-fil-A is closed on Sunday. What is that really saying? What are we really communicating, right? That our fathers are last in line, that our fathers are not worthy of honor, right? If you know a man, whether or not he is your father, whether or not your father is still in your life or you have a relationship with him, I challenge everyone on here to find somebody this week, some man of God that has integrity, that has stepped up to the plate, and even if it's in the smallest way, has made some kind of impact on your life, and honor them. Honor them. Let's show up this week to honor the men in our life, whether they are fathers or not. It's time to honor them for the roles that they play in society. Men are important. Men are vital for shaping the identity of the next generation. It grieves me at times to see how far we have strayed from this design, this magnificent design for maleness and femaleness to be expressed in the earth, for us to have dominion. But guess what? We will get back on track. As long as we continue to preach and teach with boldness, like you've heard tonight. I understand times change and our historical roles change. But those two other categories that I talked tonight, you cannot argue with biology, and you cannot argue with those biblical roles that lead to prosperity. When men and women come together in their unique roles, we can change history. We can change the tide that seems to be moving in the opposite direction. We can reverse the curse. We have that power, men. It's time for us to step up to the plate and stop allowing people to speak for us. And let's speak for ourselves what God has put inside of us to deliver. Be encouraged, men, no matter if you feel that encouragement from those people in your life that are closest to you. Hear my words. We need you. We need you to show up. The greatest gift you could give your children is the gift of your presence, showing up for them. They don't need as much money as you think they do. They don't need as many toys and trinkets as you think they do. They need you. They need your values. They need your voice. Your voice is vital to shaping who they are as men and women. I pray that this has been a blessing to you. I know it's a lot, but it's important for us to hear this message. I don't know how many people got on here because, to be honest, I like to um, get off of here and not kind of look at the numbers, because when they go up and down, you can feel intimidated by it. But I just sit back and talk, and I hope that this message has added value to your life. Again, I want to encourage you out there. If you're married, come to the Forevermore Marriage Getaway. It is an event unlike any other, and I want you there. I want you to come. If you're a wife and you say, I want to bless my husband with this getaway for Father's Day, right? I want you to sign up, and if you'll DM me, I will give you 10% off of the registration. So go now to forevermoregetaway.com. Register you and your husband for August 30th to 31st in Greenville, South Carolina at Hotel Hartness. It's going to be an incredible time. You don't want to miss it. Um, I'm signing off for tonight, but I hope to see many of you in person come the end of this summer for this fantastic event. Men, you're important. We honor you this week.